Nah. You know.
Okay, awesome.
Ooh, this is
Great. This is the first podcast.
This is gonna be a tough one. This is not gonna be easy.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this though.
Yeah. This is the first one. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, let's just introduce ourselves.
Sure. Cool. Let's do it. So hi, my name is Guershom. Most people call me Kitsa. I'm African, but I'm also Canadian, so I guess I'm Afro-Canadian.
And my name is Evan, and I am Chinese Canadian.
And so today we're talking about Black Lives Matter. The topic, not necessarily the movement.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the experiences of Black people in America and why you maybe should care about that. So, Evan, what does race mean for you?
Yeah, I think race as like a whole, it also is to do with culture and the way and the behavior of different races.
Yeah.
And how they are portrayed through other races.
Exactly.
So in a sense, like, you know, the color of your skin and the culture, the food, the music, and, you know, as a jazz drummer, that's something that I kind of dip my feet in when I play African American music.
Exactly.
Right? Jazz. But yeah, there's so many things that I could learn more about race.
Yeah.
And especially my own as well, because I grew up mostly, or I was born in Canada, right?
Yeah.
In Vancouver, BC. Same as my parents, but their parents were born in Hong Kong.
Right.
So I never really got to know where I was from originally.
Yeah.
So I really grew up here, not really knowing where exactly, you know, where did my race originally come from? Right. But, you know, being here and experiencing what it's like to be here with many races, right? It's very diverse here. Yeah. But yeah, I think just like my thoughts on the race is just like a huge thing. And with this Black Lives Matter movement happening and everything, it's really, really important for at least me as another minority to really support you know, other people like you and other folks like that. So yeah.
You bring up an interesting point because you say that being born and raised here, there was some level of disconnect to your cultural heritage and like what could be described as your original or like the birthplace of your culture. Yeah. And so I'm coming from like the opposite extreme where I am from the place that people would consider the cultural heritage of like I'm from Africa, and that's where African Americans originally came from. And so for me, race until very recently has been a very foreign idea. I grew up in East Africa. I grew up in Kenya. And in Kenya, we had a lot of amazing people. We had Middle Easterns. We had a lot of Asian people. We had some Caucasian people. But there wasn't in as much, I mean, at least in the cultures that I grew up in, there wasn't that massive disconnect between people because of the color of the skin. And I had a lot of Indian friends, and our cultures was so intertwined. We were literally the same people. It wasn't like this person is an Indian or this person is an Arab or this person is whatever. It was like we are all Kenyan. And so transitioning from that to North America, I never could imagine that. I mean, I would see it in movies, I would see it on TV, but I never could imagine that my experiences or let alone my experiences, since I'm still very new to this.
Yeah.
The experiences of anyone could be boiled down to what the color of their skin is. So that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess there was a disconnect in my upbringing between race and culture. And so I did not connect the two. I think culture was very prominent, but race was nearly a non-existent idea.
Yeah, I think like for me, that's kind of like the same as well. Like because all of us are like in Canada, right? We all, and like my school in high school was mostly, you know, Asians, but you know, with a sprinkle of you know, other cultures and ethnicities. Right. But I really didn't know who was Korean, who was Japanese, who was Cantonese, who was, you know, like Asian, like different from different places in Asia. Yeah. And for me, it's like, oh, they're Asian, but I really didn't know, like, you know, the you know, oh, like he's Korean, or like, oh, she's Japanese, or you know, stuff like that. And I couldn't even, like, sure, I could tell like through their last name, but that wasn't really like a thing that I was really thinking about until, like, you know, in university and starting to realize, you know, that also culture and race is a big thing too. Right. Through that. So yeah, exactly.
And so we are artists, we are both creators, and the way that we express ourselves is through our craft, through what we make. You play jazz music, which is, it has its roots in the African American community. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yeah, well, it first originated through actually black slavery in America, down south. And basically jazz was kind of an expression, or that kind of music. And it was basically what we call work songs. Right. So there would be something called a call and a response. So someone out in the field working would, you know, say, you know, and sing like a phrase, and then everyone would call it back using a different melody or phrase. Right. Everyone else. Right. So it'd be like that one person is saying like a melody, and then, you know, everyone else responding to that. So that's what we call and response. Yeah. And through that, you know, fast forward to now, you know, that those kind of work songs has now been integrated in American culture through black slavery and through just the oppression, and how music was an expression of that oppression. Right. So as me, as a, you know, Chinese Canadian, I have to be able to respect and know where the music is coming from, so that, you know, I know what I'm dealing with, and just on context and where the history of jazz originates from, and just like hold a bunch of respect for that, knowing that now I'm studying, you know, that. So yeah.
I think this is where we get into the very heartbreaking deaths that have happened over the summer. It's been a lot, and they've all been just really, really bad. But the first one that I recall, that and this was in a sense my first really direct confrontation with race. There's always been a confrontation with white privilege. There's always been that wrestle with white supremacy, and there's always that struggle, and I've always been aware of that. I've always been aware that I don't really want to esteem this one group of people higher than others, but I don't think I've ever really tried to empathize with the experiences of black people in America. I have never really taken that time to actually ask, what does it mean to be black in America? And so when Ahmaud Arbery died, that's when I had that initial encounter, and I was first asked, what does it mean to be black in America? And like I was saying, I'm an artist, I'm a creator. The way that I express myself is through making and producing and being part of the Daniels community. That's sometimes I feel like you can get lost in your craft, but When Ahmad died, I curated 3 pictures on Instagram.
Yeah, your response was through those pictures, yeah.
Yeah, and with these pictures inspired by a music video by Donald Glover, I was trying to really reconcile three separate identities. I was trying to reconcile my African identity with the Black experience in America. I was trying to really wrestle with what the Black experience in America looks like, police brutality and whatnot. And with the final image, I was trying to reconcile my Christian identity with oppression, because the Christian faith has a very close relationship with oppressed peoples all over the world. And so I was trying to reconcile all of these ideas. But initially, and I think I made this comment, I said that I was not Black in one of those images, and that's an interesting thing to say, because at that time I didn't know what it meant to be Black. And so in saying that, I was reflecting that the color of my skin doesn't define me, which can sound powerful, but after some reflection, I realized that that was me choosing to isolate myself from the experience of people who have taken a term that has been used to oppress them, and I've used it as a form of empowerment. And they've chosen to say, hey, you call me Black? Yes, I am Black. Yeah. And there's this poem that I had from this South American poet. I can't remember her name off of the top of my head, but she says that, why do you call me a person of color? What color? Black. That's the color. It's not just, I'm not just a person of color, I'm a Black person. And I think looking through Instagram, it's been amazing, the response. But this was my first experience, and I remember seeing this post posted by a friend of mine from New York, who's also in architecture, and she was posting in response to something that happened with Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. It's that there was this relationship between Black people and Asian people, and the phrase was that yellow peril for Black power, and they're both terms that have been used to oppress. And so what did it mean for you to wrestle with this very new idea that you've never been exposed to, that no one has really confronted you with that question?
Wow, that's like really interesting. Like just like one thing that stuck out was like, oh, I'm not Black, because at that moment you didn't know what it meant to be Black.
Exactly.
Like that to me, like just breaks my heart. And like for me, as you know, someone who is Asian, realizing that I don't know what it means to be Cantonese. I don't even speak my own language. And when I see that disconnect, there's a lot of me that kind of wants to find belonging through something else, and it's not through being Cantonese, but it's through being Canadian. And that's where I found my identity for all of these years. Throughout elementary school, throughout high school. And so I was actually proud of my whitewashedness or being a banana. And I would say, like I don't speak my own language, I'm like Canadian and everything. And I was proud of that. But in a sense, like that kind of neglected the other part of me where I am Asian too, and I come from originally Hong Kong. And so like I was wrestling with like my identity as Asian. How do I represent myself in a way that is both Canadian but Asian, and accepting that, and not just accepting it but also proclaiming that, and really accepting that, oh, I'm Asian and this is a part of me, and I'm going to be proud. And that's where the pride should come from. Not necessarily the Canadianness of me, even though, that's more about culture. For me, being an Asian, being Cantonese, being Chinese, like, I should be proud of that. I can't take my skin and change it into like, something else. In a sense, it's like switching that pride from Canadianness to Chinese, and creating this whole different identity of Chinese Canadian.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I've been like wrestling with since like last year, actually. Since I took a course on it called Chinese Canadian Studies. It talked about the history of you know, the immigration and like, you know, the head tax when people from China who were just trying to get a job into this like the Canadian dream and everything. So just like really digging deep into you know, my personal identity and what it means to be an Asian. So.
I wanted to mention something that you explained really well. Education is the most powerful thing, and something that came up constantly throughout Black Lives Matter was a lot of people asking, hey, how can we be allies? How can we be allies? And that's a very important question to us, because that was also a question I needed to ask. And for me, step one was really embracing this whole being black in America identity, which you are also doing in a different way by embracing that you are Cantonese, but you're also in Canada. And I think step two, and this was a question that I had to reflect on for a bit longer, allyship is listening, you know. It's really asking, hey, let me hear your story. And so I think after I watched the video with Ahmaud Arbery and just him being shot down, and then I watched the video with George Floyd and the police officer just putting his knee on his neck for that long. I just stayed up the whole night on YouTube and consistently I was just listening to black experiences in America, and not only was I listening to it, I was empathizing with that. And empathy, I think, is one of the biggest gifts that we are missing as a society right now. A lot of people are quick to point fingers, and maybe that's the beautiful thing about COVID, is that we start to see people collectively share this sentiment of empathy, and people coming together and they're like, hey, your story matters, who you are matters, and we want to hear that. And so it's interesting to talk about education and how education can happen on many different levels, in friendship, but also in school, and especially among us creatives. Personally, as a designer, it's been so long. Like, the only people I learn about in architecture are all sadly dead white men, some women, but mostly dead white men. And how about the very talented architects who are from Japan? Or how about the innovation that's happening in Africa? How about the talented people, designers, artists, creators of color who we never talk about because it just hasn't been the status quo.
And it's like that white representative like that has all that power. And like, in a sense, it's like us talking about education and everything, like it's a privilege to learn. Like, for me, it's a privilege to learn and have the, you know, to learn jazz because it's from a different culture, it's from a different ethnicity, and it's, you know, those roots are not, you know, part of my culture's history, right? But me being able to learn about that and to be educated on that stuff is a privilege, right? And like you said, listening, in a sense, listening is a time for us to educate ourselves, right? It's not about us talking, even though we are talking about, you know, on this podcast, you know, it's for other people to listen to, and just like being able to hear like both of our stories. And even though we won't have too much time to talk about that, it's just kind of dipping, you know, our feet into this conversation, right? And what race is.
So as a designer, just as a human being, the best thing you can do is to start those conversations. They won't be easy, but just get in there.
Just listen.
Let's call it a wrap.
Sick.
Sweet.
So this is one of the few podcasts. Thank you guys so much for listening.
For tuning in.
For tuning in.
We're in Toronto right now. I mean, COVID is a thing, but we're working around that, and we're looking forward to sort of going on this adventure with you.
Awesome. Great.
Yep.
So we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yep. Awesome. Keep creating. Bye.
Peace.